I guess Andy's having trouble too.
Okay.
And
Don't know.
I can't do it.
Katie, there's a link under where it says where it talks about being a host. There's a link that says if you're not the host, you can join as an attendee.
Oh,
Okay.
there you go.
You gotta get another mask. This just isn't working.
I've got about 100 in my car.
I know, I
That
got
are
it.
of this
I got it
design.
at home for some reason.
Right.
Oh, I like that, that's nice.
It's really adjustable. It's super nice.
Yeah.
If you want any of them, you can follow me out.
Well, no, I got masks, but for some reason I grabbed this one.
Right, right.
Sorry for the delay, Katie.
Hey,
It's asking me for a password and I was clicking the wrong link.
okay, well, you're on right now.
All right, well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining the work session. I am going to share my screen. And just so you know, my name is Andy Arnold. I'm a planner with SEH. I work with Nancy Dostal as your on-call planners here in the town at Bayfield. And Katie obviously is overseeing us and asked us to do this housing study for you and present it tonight. So first, apologize for technical difficulties. Let me figure out how to share this screen for you. Just give me 1 second. All right, Katie, are you seeing my PowerPoint right now?
Yes,
All right, perfect. So let me present this. Great. Okay, well, first and foremost, this is a housing report on the town of Bayfield. What we wanted to do is study the town's housing demands and supply. The way that we did this is we looked at 4 perspectives for the town. So we analyzed housing needs based on the town's current demography and forecasted growth. We wanted to look at current land use for the town, the existing housing stock that we're seeing in the town of Bayfield, and also housing affordability. And just so that you know, all of this data used in this report has been sourced from the U.S. Census Bureau, the State Demographer's Office. We use a lot of it from our own county assessor's office. And we also looked at local real estate reports. And I just want you to know, as we go through this, if anyone wants to interrupt me, ask a question, please do so. I expect this presentation to last no more than about a half an hour, so we do have some time for Q&A if you would like to, ask me questions. So don't be shy, feel free to jump in. So we're going to start off by just taking a look at a map of Bayfield. So this is an aerial image. The blue and the orange that you see are your current town limits, current parcels. This map might be a little easier to see. And just so you know, Bayfield is a town that's just shy of 1,000 acres currently. It has about 1,288 parcels within the town's limits. And so that's what we were analyzing to get all of our data within this housing report. So we were looking at first demographics and forecasted growth. Some of our key findings is that the town has a population currently of 2,708 people. The adults between the ages of 30 and 49 represent the most significant group of the town's population, representing 38% of the total. We've noticed that population, and we'll show you in a little bit, increased gradually since the Great Recession, but then we're starting to see a dip in population growth over the last 2 years, and we'll get into that as to why. And we have also found that Bayfield follows very similar population trends that are throughout LaPlata County. And Bayfield's share and expected countywide population growth is very much housing dependent. So starting with this chart, this is population by age, with age cohorts going in 5 years. So we're starting at 0 to 5 all the way up to 85 and over. And what we've noticed is that actually Bayfield's a very young town. It's about 6 years younger than the county. Bayfield's median age, which is indicated by red right here, is right around 34 years of age. La Plata County's median age is about 40 years, and Bayfield's younger than the national average of 37 years. And so this is clearly indicated when we take those age cohorts and look at a percentage of the town's population. So you can see with these peaks and valleys that adults between the ages of 30 and 49 are representing 38% of the town's population. What's interesting is that this age group is also very likely to have school-age children, which is our second largest age cohort here in Bayfield. You can see from 0 all the way to 15 years of age being a big age cohort. I think one of the big reasons for that is, one, there's a great school district here, so it makes it very attractive. But Bayfield is largely a residential community, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So this is population growth trended over the last decade throughout the town. I have mentioned that the town currently has a population of approximately 2,708 people, and that has grown from 2010, which was 2,357 people. You can see that it was steady population growth up into 2018, in which case it actually tapered off a little bit. And we can see that more clearly on this chart. So this chart's showing you year over year percent change in population. Just to give you an idea of how this contrasts with the state, Colorado's year over year population change going back to the past decade has been 1.6% annual growth. So for the better part of the decade, Bayfield was growing at a faster rate than the state of Colorado. You can see that in 2012, 2013, and it hit its zenith in 2017 with 2.51% annual growth. Since then, we've seen a decline. In 2018, annual population growth was only about 0.9%, less than 1% for the first time in a decade, and then a negative percentage population growth in 2019. So some of the reasons for this are unknown, but we do know it's largely dependent on the availability of housing. We also looked at residential housing permits that were released throughout the county over the last decade, and we found a 36% decline countywide in 2019 compared to 2018, and also a decline from 2018 to 2017. So clearly, housing supply has a direct impact on population growth. But we also have noticed a similar trend when we're looking at how growth throughout Plata County, not just in Bayfield, but in its neighboring communities, that all of the communities are kind of following a similar population trend. This is a convoluted map, or a graph, I'll give you that. But Bayfield is in the red. You can see Ignacio and Durango are going to be indicated by blue and by green. And we have the unincorporated La Plata County in purple. And so all of them are relatively trending downward. You can see Bayfield, Ignacio, and the unincorporated areas of La Plata County all having negative population growth in 2019. Durango's been more up and down, but even Durango trended down in 2019, again, indicating that building permits had fallen short for that year. To make more sense of it, though, we trended all these population growth, so this annual population change in all these municipalities, and looked at it, and what we see is that these trends are very much similar in Bayfield, Ignacio, the unincorporated areas of La Plata County, even Durango, which looks like it was staying steady, is trending downward towards the end of this decade. What this tells us is that the town of Bayfield is going to follow very similar population trends that are happening throughout La Plata County. And that's important because the state demographer's office is expecting population growth to surge throughout the county over the next 5 years. You can see this on the chart with this orange line. We have seen population growth countywide hovering around 1.3%. The state demographer expects population growth over the next 5 years to average 2.1%. and then trend down from there. I look at this as an opportunity for the town, if it wills it, to capture some of this anticipated population growth. But again, it's very contingent on housing supply and housing affordability. We all know that with COVID hitting and a lot of people moving out into the more rural areas of the nation, we've seen housing prices skyrocket throughout LaPlata County, Durango. Bayfield's housing prices are increasing. So being able to capture this population growth, it has to take a concerted effort. So our final takeaways, I think that one, Bayfield has a relatively young population compared to its neighboring towns and the state, with a median age of 34 years of age. Now, what's important to note from that earlier chart is that there seems to be an underrepresentation of post-college age residents in Bayfield, and also older residents. And I think as a town, as a community, and thinking about, what type of housing do we need, those are two demographics that would be important to target. Bayfield's population growth, again, has closely mirrored that of county trends. So as long as we can, if Bayfield has mirrored those trends in the past, we can anticipate that they're going to be mirroring the population growth trends in the future. So there is an opportunity for the town to seize upon. And then LaPlata County's population growth, again, over the next decade represents that opportunity I've been talking about for the town to capture some of this growth. I underlined at the bottom, housing is definitely key to realizing all of these opportunities. So that's demographics. You can stop there if anybody has a question, or just jump right onto land use. All right, not hearing any questions, so I'll get into land use. So what we did when analyzing the town of Bayfield is we wanted to look at how the land is currently being used. So the map that you have before you right here is an assessment map. This map is indicating not how parcels are zoned for future land use, what the town may desire to have on these parcels, but how parcels are currently being taxed throughout the town of Bayfield. Excuse me. And so you have 6 assessment categories. In gray, you have tax exempt parcels, as the name states. These are parcels that are not paying any property taxes for the land or the building on them. Tax exempt parcels would include schools, government institutions, parks, anything along those lines. The important key is that they're just not generating any property tax revenue for the town. You also have agricultural parcels. These are parcels that are indicated in green that are going to have an agricultural use. You have one industrial parcel that's going to be in purple, and then also commercial parcels in red and residential parcels in yellow. I want to just make a quick note of that vacant parcel in orange there. That doesn't mean that it doesn't indicate vacancies. There's not just one vacancy throughout the town of Bayfield. It just means that the assessor is putting a 29% ratio on that parcel dedicated as vacant. Sorry to get a little wonky, but should point that out. What should jump out to you though is how much of this map is gray and yellow, meaning that the majority of Bayfield looks like it's residentially assessed and assessed as tax exempt. So we dug into that a little deeper and looked at these percentages on a per parcel basis. So we looked at the number of parcels. I mentioned earlier, Bayfield has about 1,200 parcels within its town limits. 85% of those parcels are currently assessed at residential. Only 6.7% are commercially assessed, and 6.83% are tax exempt. Now, one of the things that jumped out to me when I was looking at this is that the reason why such a high number of the parcels are currently residentially assessed is because they typically represent, on average, the smallest parcel. Residentially assessed parcels, on average, are 0.4 acres, around 17,000 square feet. This means that the majority of Bayfield's parcels are subdivisions. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's dense development. I mean, it's almost half an acre. That's certainly not dense residential development. But it does indicate that commercial parcels, which are averaging around 1 acre, and tax exempt parcels, which are averaging 4 acres, may have an opportunity to exhibit a little more higher density development or higher intensity So that was just the number of parcels. We also want to look at acreage. Acreage is something that probably makes a little bit more sense to people visually. It's what you saw on the map. And even when we look at acreage, residential parcels still represent the lion's share of the town of Bayfield at 45%. But what really jumps out to you is how much of the town is tax exempt. 40% of the town of Bayfield is currently under the tax exempt category. That means 40% of your land isn't generating any revenue. And that could be okay. Again, schools, government institutions, parks, perfectly fine. But it's something to keep in mind from a financial health standpoint. Well, how much of our land is actually producing the revenue we need to pay for services, pay for infrastructure, pay for more police officers, firefighters, so on and so forth. And although this isn't exactly tied to housing, I think it's an important point to make. Notice that commercial assessment by acreage is under 10%. So under 10% of your land is assessed commercially. That's important because I looked at the numbers, and commercial properties in Bayfield account for 56% of its assessed value. That's over half of your revenue is coming from less than 10% of your land. That's an important thing to keep in mind moving forward, because tax exempt properties obviously aren't generating any revenue. And residential properties are assessed at a much lower ratio. It's only 7.15% net currently in Colorado. So that means if Bayfield doesn't grow, if Bayfield captures this forecasted growth and produces more homes, it's very difficult for those homes to pay for the necessary infrastructure. So you would hope that the population growth will also coincide with some commercial growth in the town.
I have a
This
quick,
chart is
excuse,
going over what I had mentioned earlier, which is
Is
the
this on?
density of parcels within the town.
I'm sorry.
Is
He has
this
a
on?
question.
Sorry.
So we have a question, real quick.
Yeah. Back
Oh, sorry,
on,
guys, I couldn't hear you. What was the question?
my first question is my microphone on? Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll just have
Yeah,
to get closer.
minor thing, on the land use key findings, at the bottom
Yes.
of my page, it has Ignacio partial percentage by assessment. Was that just a typo?
That is a typo. I apologize for that.
Okay,
That should read Bayfield parcel percentage by assessment.
okay, just wanted to make sure that the Ignacio slide didn't get put in there.
Yeah, no,
Thought the
this
same
is,
thing.
this is definitely Bayfield's slide. I do apologize that Ignacio popped up. I had saw that earlier today, and I was hoping no one would see it.
I saw it too.
Thank you.
It's all right, you're keeping me honest, that's what, I appreciate that. So yeah, no, rest assured, this is very much a Bayfield breakdown of assessment categories. Any other questions before I move on? All right. So again, average acreage per parcel, like I was saying, for residential parcels, 0.4 acres. That's not a high density, right? That's 17,000 square feet per parcel. I think it underscores the opportunity for commercial land, tax exempt land to be reevaluated by there is an opportunity for higher density development, higher density development, something along those lines. So moving on from land use, we see how the land is being utilized. We also want to understand, well, what's the housing stock look like in Bayfield currently? You know, what type of structures do you have? How old are they? How are they being used? Are they being rented? Are they owned? And so we dug into that data. And so what we found on some of the key findings is that the average age of a residence in Bayfield is 1989. Like I said before, this is a relatively young age. I know, sir, you brought up Ignacio. Ignacio's was in the 1940s for their average age of their structures. So that's a good thing that Bayfield has a younger housing stock. What was even more shocking to me is that 48% of the town's standalone structures were constructed after 2001. So there was a big surge of development leading up to the Great Recession. The analysis found that despite this uptick in construction, that pretty much, and I'll go over this in a little bit, that happened from 2013 to 2015, housing starts have begun to decline again throughout the town. And like I said earlier, that is a trend that's happening throughout La Plata County, which contributes to the increase in housing prices throughout the county. The majority of the housing stock also exists as single-family homes. This is probably something obvious to you just by driving around and seeing the type of housing. I think it also shows that there's an opportunity, though, to diversify the housing stock, potentially bring in different townhomes, multifamily homes, apartments within the town's limits. This is certainly shown when only 17% of Bayfield's occupied housing units are being rented. That's about half the state average. So digging a little deeper, this is a timeline of all of the buildings within Bayfield and when they were currently constructed according to La Plata County's assessment. And so, as you can see, from this like skyline type view, most of the housing starts peaked from 2000 to 2010, you know, especially around 2005. So that was a period of extreme growth. It has fallen from that point, and you know, from 2015 was another high point. We're starting to see growth kind of resemble that which happened in the 1960s and 1970s. This chart helps make it a little clearer. We've clumped all of those building construction dates together in 2-decade intervals. Again, 48%, almost half of the housing stock was constructed from 2001 onward. In 1960, you saw 13% of the housing stock. In the 80s was this gradual increase. So we are on a downward decline from that, but with the growth that's expected to come from to La Plata County, it wouldn't be unreasonable to see Bayfield recapture some of that construction that it had before the Great Recession. Again, land and price permitting. This chart is breaking out the specific types of housing. So on the previous charts, I showed you all structures and how many were built. This is the type of structure that's being built. So we have single-family residential, duplexes and triplexes, multifamily housing from 4 to 8 units, multifamily housing that's over 9 units, condominiums, townhomes, housing parks, which would have mobile homes on them, manufactured homes, and modular single-family residential homes. Now, just so you know, all of these categories are coming from La Plata County's assessor's office. And next to each of these categories is the average year that they were built. So overall, the town has an average year build of 1989 for their housing stock. You can see single-family residential is pretty much spot on to that. But what jumped out to me when I looked at these numbers was 2 things. One is that townhomes seem to be a very successful housing type. They're the newest type of housing that has been introduced with an average age of 2009. And then the other thing is that this higher density housing, specifically duplexes and triplexes and larger apartment complexes, haven't really been constructed anytime recently. That could mean one of 2 things. One, it could mean that there's not demand for that type of housing, or that type of housing unit. I think it also means that there's an opportunity to bring that type of diversity in housing stock to the town.
No, I need to ask a question and point something out here, because clearly you've missed something. Because the Fox Farm subdivision is entirely duplexes. The entire subdivision is duplexes. And they were all built, they are all built since 2000, every one of them. And we've got close to 50 units in there.
I'm curious if that might, and I apologize, I'll have to double check the data. I know that I'm getting this from the assessor. I can double check and see if townhome is what is the category that they're using for Fox Farm. That would make sense given that the average age is 2009. But I'll double check and see why duplex, triplex, and what is the key difference between that. Sometimes my understanding is that townhomes mean single family attached.
You know, that may be true, just the nomenclature issue.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. I'll have to dig into that. Again, I do think that obviously the multifamily apartment type housing, the higher density housing, has not been coming online within Bayfield in the past couple decades. And that could mean that it's just not desired. It also could mean that if there's an opportunity. But thank you, sir, for pointing that out. Did anybody have any other questions on that before I move on? Okay, thank you. So digging a little deeper, when we look at all of the different, the existing housing stock and put it as a pie chart, and look at percentages, you can see that single-family residential is the lion's share of the housing stock in Bayfield. And then everything else, pretty much that 20% is divided up between the townhomes, the apartments, manufactured homes, and single-family residential homes. And sir, I should point this out, that mobile homes, that data, because they're assessed differently than a stick-built structure or even a modular structure, then we weren't able to get that data for this pie chart. Though I would imagine that there's a much higher percentage of manufactured homes than 0.4%. But if you want that, we can get that for you as well. I think the key takeaway though, when we jump to this chart, and we count up the number of housing units in Bayfield, we're seeing that there is a lack of diversity in the housing types. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I do think that if you're trying to attract different types of growth, whether it's aging in place, retirees, or people that are post-collegiate, around their 30s like myself, sometimes getting a mortgage is a tall order, and having apartments and rental units can help bridge that gap and maybe attract more of that population into the community. Overall, we see in orange here, 991 units is what we counted up from the assessor's office. If you dig a little deeper, if you look at the state demographer's office or the U.S. Census Bureau, they're going to have a slightly higher number. We're confident that 991 is correct because that's being counted from the local assessor, whereas the census and the state demographer are projecting based upon average household size. But that's just a caveat. The 795 of that 991 is single-family residential, and about 97 units are going to fall into that townhome category. Again, I believe this is an opportunity for the town, if it desires, to have different types of housing throughout it. Finally, we looked at tenure. We wanted to see, well, how much of this housing stock is currently being owned and how much is currently being rented. And that's what you can see from this pie chart. The blue is the owner-occupied housing. That's 83% of the town housing stock. It has a mortgage or is paid off. Only 17% of the town's housing stock is currently renter-occupied. Colorado's renter percentage average is 34%. So what that means is that Bayfield's about half the state average in terms of rentership. So finally, and this is a very key piece, is housing affordability. Now, housing affordability is a buzzword, obviously. It's a nationwide issue. But what actually qualifies as being affordable is very community-centric. It's based on local income levels and local housing unit prices. An affordable home in San Francisco means very different. It's a very different thing than an affordable home in my hometown in Philadelphia or in Indianapolis or anywhere else. And so to make sense of that all, to make it relative, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, defines an affordable dwelling as one that as a dwelling that a household can obtain for 30% or less of its income. And we'll get into that on the next slide in a little more detail. The key statistic to keep in mind when we're talking about housing affordability is area median income, AMI. That determines the relative affordability of housing within specific communities like Bayfield. And subsidized housing, whether it's funded by tax credits or government grants, also uses AMI to determine project eligibility. Now, just so you know, subsidized housing doesn't necessarily mean Section 8 or project housing built by the government, but any type of affordable housing complex that's funded by tax credits. It's called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit System. So it's going to use AMI to determine which projects are going to be eligible for that type of program. So when we looked at AMI levels within Bayfield, we found that Bayfield's area median income, this is household income, is just over $66,000 in 2019. The chart below, the chart that you're looking at here, you can see Bayfield in blue and LaPlata County in red. Plata County's AMI at 100% is at around 83,000, whereas Bayfield's is 66,000. So all that means is that a house that's affordable at any one of these AMI levels, 30% to 100%, has to be relative to that community. So relative to La Plata County if it's out in the county, or relative to Bayfield if it's within Bayfield. And so getting a little deeper into that, we can project what the housing cost ceiling looks like for Bayfield residents, right? So if I'm earning 90% of Bayfield's AMI, that means if I spend $1 over $1,488 per month on a rent or on a mortgage, I'm considered a cost burden by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That means that my house is considered unaffordable. So that's a way that we can, that's our barometer for trying to figure out how we can bring online affordable housing. What is our typical monthly cost that we would have to stay under to make sure that housing would be affordable. And to understand that better, we should look at, what is the median value of homes in Bayfield. Now, obviously, Bayfield is, I want to say, this number that I got is from the beginning of this year. With COVID and this surge of people moving out into the rural areas, I guarantee you that number is much higher now. But when we got our data, the median home value in Bayfield was around $318,000. Now, I apologize, this chart's in reverse now. Bayfield's in red and La Plata County's in blue. You can see that the majority of Bayfield's housing stock is going to fall between that $200,000 to $300,000 level and that $300,000 to $500,000 level. What we found is that because the median is a little over $300,000, most of it is between that high twos and mid $300,000 range. This is a bit concerning simply because this is a housing price that's starting to get away from the area median income levels of the majority of the community. What I mean by that is, I don't want to jump to rents just yet. If I was earning 80% AMI in Bayfield, which, jumping back here, is $52,000 a year, a $318,000 house would be considered a cost burden mortgage for the bank. At $90, that is also getting very close to a cost burden mortgage for a person like me. So you can see as housing continues to increase, the price of housing, it's starting to get away from what Bayfield had been in the past, where if you're earning the area median income, you can purchase the median household value. Something to keep in mind as population growth is expected to come to the county. So we also wanted to look at rents, even though it's only 17% of the town. We wanted to see, well, what is the rent percentages and how much does that look like? So La Plata County is going to be in blue here, Bayfield's going to be in red, and we found that rents that are at or above $1,000 represent 60% or more of Bayfield's area median income, and also that the majority of the rents, almost 48% of the rents, are going to be below. 48% of the renters in town are below that $1,000 a month mark. So if we were to think about subsidized housing, any affordable housing developments that are going to bring apartments into the community to cater to that 60% or under AMI level, that's a good barometer, keeping rents under $1,000. If you can develop a housing development that has $1,000 a month rents, you're going to serve a large portion of the lower income population. And so finally, we wanted to compare those rents and owner-occupied housing to La Plata County and the state. And that's what you're seeing on this final chart. So you can see the percent that are in red are those that are renting. In blue, those are people that own their house, have a mortgage. And the percentages are the percent that are cost burden. So the good news is that Bayfield has a much smaller percentage of its renters being cost burden than either the county or the state. But what's a little concerning is that Bayfield's owner-occupied housing, there's actually a higher percentage of the community that's cost burden than the county. It's very close, 33% to 32.4%. And Bayfield's about 5 percentage points higher than the state average of people that own a house but are paying more than 30% of their monthly income. So something to keep in mind as Bayfield continues to grow, trying to keep these percentages down so that the housing can stay affordable and can support the community. So in conclusion, I'm just going to go over some short final recommendations. After analyzing this data, we thought that Bayfield should prioritize housing projects to help attract the post-collegiate population that we saw dip off in the late 20s, but also to allow current residents to age in place. We should also try to capture the expected population growth that's supposed to come to La Plata County by increasing supply. If that doesn't happen, you could expect housing prices to continue to skyrocket over the next couple of years. We also pointed out that Bayfield should prioritize higher density mixed-use housing. I think mixed use is a great way of diversifying not only the housing stock, but the tax base, generating more revenue to pay for infrastructure, to pay for community services. And then that also brings in that apartment housing that can help diversify the population. And Bayfield should also focus on the affordable housing being as an increasing concern, not just for Bayfield, pretty much nationwide, certainly a concern for our corner of Colorado. But Bayfield has a great reputation of being a place that's beautiful, that you can afford to move into. And if the housing stock falls behind on that, if the supply doesn't keep up with the pace of demand, you can quickly see Bayfield become a place that very few people can afford a house in. That is what we found from this presentation. I'm going to turn it over to final questions. Katie, if you have any questions, please let me know. I can get a copy of this presentation out to the board, and of course we have all of this data in some Excel spreadsheets, so if you want to get wonky and geek out like I love to do with housing, please shoot me an email. I'm happy to share that data with you.
Andy, I don't have any questions, but I would ask the board if they have any questions. I think we also have some board members that are also on Zoom that may have questions as well.
Yes, I have a question. In your conclusion, you mentioned several times that Bayfield should prioritize different things. And given that we are a free market society, and what do you have for prioritization tools that you would recommend to us to use?
Sir, I'm very sorry. I had a difficult time hearing you. I caught the conclusion, and you said something about tools, but I didn't catch all of that.
Okay, let me try it again. Can you hear me better now?
That's much clearer. Thank you.
Okay. In your conclusion, you mentioned several times prioritization, that we should prioritize housing projects and we should prioritize higher density, those sorts of things. Do you have any prioritization tools that you could recommend to us to use as the town? And because, I wrestle with that because we are essentially a free market society, and whoever wants to come in and build something, that's kind of their call. So what prioritization tools do we have?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
For bringing that up. I focus on economic development a lot, and I agree that we are a free market. You can't force a developer to develop something, but you can incentivize it, and I think you can also look at regulations that make it a little easier to go through with that development. So I would say some of the soft ways that the town can help prioritize this type of housing project or these type of housing projects is to certainly look at the zoning map, look at the current land use code, see if there's ways of encouraging this certain type of development or seeing if there's any handicaps to it, that, maybe there's some regulatory hurdles that developers say, it's just easier to do single family versus this, versus multifamily. Because of X, Y, and Z. That would be my first thing as a planner to look at, because those are just our regulatory tools. In terms of incentivization, though, Colorado has some great ways of incentivizing housing development. I work closely with individuals over at DOLA. They have different grant programs, even loan programs for developers that are eager to develop affordable housing in rural communities throughout Colorado. I think they do a great job. I'm familiar with and our firm, and I'm sure Katie is too, of Colorado's Housing and Finance Authority. That's something that local developers developers or a housing developer, they should certainly talk to those type of programs to see if they can get some subsidies. What you can do as a town though, and this is something that I specialize in, is urban renewal. They're called URAs. We recently created one in the city of Durango. Urban renewal authorities allow you to not only get grants or potentially issue bonds depending on the size of the development, but you can take future tax revenues and basically look at the present value of future type development, provide it to a developer to help close some maybe funding gaps or potentially pay for a public improvement that might be preventing development from happening. Those are just some of the tools within the toolbox that you as a community have at your disposal to try to prioritize certain things.
Thank you.
All right, anybody on Zoom have any questions? I think we got a few people on there.
I have a question because when you look at the parcel map for Bayfield, the largest parcel, yeah, you can look at it on the north. The very first map that you gave us showed it quite succinctly, and that's that large tax exempt parcel on the very north edge of Bayfield. I'm not certain how the church came to acquire that, but it is in the possession of a church. And I was wondering if there was some kind of a mechanism that you would see, being that that was originally slated as a development adjacent to the town and should be tax generating for the revenue for the town. I mean, it should be a viable subdivision when it was all said and done. But that went south, I think, in 2008, when everything else went south, and just part of the subdivision got done. But like I said, is there something available from DOLA that you're aware of that could incentivize that large or the ownership of that group to maybe consider developing that? Because as I look at things, that's one of the parcels adjacent to the town that's easiest to develop, and we need to come up with some kind of a mechanism to make that easier for them, or if we, for the town too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I don't know of any particular program from DOLA that would allow, well, I should back up. I think the most important thing to do as when we're looking at community development is certainly work with developers, right? And work with landowners. Nothing gets done if it's a contentious relationship. Now, I'm not familiar with this parcel or the church. I think you mentioned church that owns it.
Yes.
But I certainly would see it as, if it is a community development organization, if it's a church, a nonprofit that's there, I guess I would start off by approaching the church and asking them, is there any reason why you're not developing this parcel, or do you have any desire to? And maybe they say that, oh, well, there's some funding restrictions, maybe they don't have the know-how. That's when DOLA can really help out. It's something that Nancy and I also can help you with if you need be. But I know that DOLA has all sorts of housing specialists that are focused on very specific areas of Colorado to try to help jumpstart certain development, as long as it's housing. Now, if you're looking for commercial development, again, that's just as simple as doing a feasibility study, maybe showing people what they have that they might not be aware of, right? A landowner might not be aware that there's a hot market for a certain type of development, or that the steps to taking that development are actually easier than they might originally have thought. But I think it starts with communication.
Thanks.
No problem. I think we got a little over with 10 minutes left. Anybody have any other questions?
I don't have a question. I just appreciate the PowerPoint, and I would love a copy of this. This is all the questions I get asked, just in passing. People are always curious about these statistics, and it would just be nice to have these on hand.
Absolutely. We'll get that over to you without the Ignacio typo. Step on your toes.
All right, well, if you'd like to give our screen back, thank you very much, Andy. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Hey, no problem. Thank you so much for listening through that. I appreciate you guys. You have a great night.
Thank you.
We need some apartments, I think.
Sorry?
I always hear, I mean, people are just like, they can never find anything to rent out here.
Yep.
It's-
Right.
Apartments,
Right.
apartments.
So now would be a good time to build a spec house, huh?
Spec
So
apartments.
A spec house. I have people asking about that too.
Yeah.
Like, go for it. I got that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really, really hard to figure this thing out because, you know, I mean, when he's talking about AMI, you also have to include, you know, if you're doing a 45-minute commute or a 10-minute commute, you know, if you're able, which ties back into economic development here, that affects the affordability of housing. You
I
know,
just want to make
because
sure
you-
that you know that people are on Zoom or watching you, and it looks like a private conversation.
Oh,
Because they can't hear you.
okay, I didn't think we were on tap yet.
Yep, they are.
We're here.
We have about 10 minutes before we're gonna start, because that's what it's publicized, so if you need to take a breather, do it now.
I need to get a drink of water, but I can't. David, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing good. It's,
Sure.
I have 3 large bucks that will not stay out of my yard, and they are destroying.
So for those of you on Zoom, the mayor is just going to start the meeting here at 7:30.
Just in case the public wants to join in, because it was advertised that way.
Well, actually, it was just to follow the work session.
Oh, okay.
I didn't either.
Until I looked at the, so I didn't get a chance to print this out. I need to print it right before I leave.
Did your computer come back up?
No. Remember when we left? I went to click
Yeah.
approve payroll, remember?
Yep.
And I couldn't. We'll see you tomorrow. It was on my work and his glasses got broke, so he was calling me a minute ago. Like, great. Like, we really needed that to afford that right now. We need to pay for it. I mean, he has insurance. Nobody has paid him to cover that much of your glasses.
Right? Is he?
Yeah, he's coming tomorrow.
He's coming?
Mm-hmm. Luckily, I have like 4, so I can, I'll just come in earlier, not take lunch. My husband will be off.
Yeah. When are you meeting?
Huh?
When are you meeting?
Tomorrow?
Oh, just tomorrow.
No, I'll just leave at like 4 tomorrow,
Oh.
cause he said he'd be here around 4.
Oh, okay.
Pick them up. But my husband will at least be off,
Right?
cause I don't wanna meet him if it's him, cause he's a jerk.
Oh.
That's just what I was trying to check.
Oh. That's your job.
Yep.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order dated Tuesday, January 5th, 2021. It is 7:26. Roll call, please.
Trustee Black.
Here.
Trustee Dallison. Yes. I am here. Okay. Trustee Joswick.
Here.
Trustee Moreland. Here. Trustee Politis. Here. Trustee Cesaro.
Here.
And Mayor Tarkington.
Here.
All present.
All right, if everybody would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, do we have any conflicts of interest that we want to disclose at this time from the board? Hearing none, we will move on to general public input. Do we have any general public input not pertaining to any of the agenda items? If so, you can please state your name and address for the board. You'll have 3 minutes. Anyone out there in Zoom?
Ron Donovan is the only
Okay.
public I see out there.
Keep in mind, yeah, if we have any general public input based on a agenda item, you will get a chance during that section of the meeting. Did everyone get a chance to look at the agenda?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve this evening's agenda, January 5th.
Do I have a second? Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Black.
Here,
Trustee Dallison.
or yes?
Trustee Joswick.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Trustee Moreland. Trustee Politis.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro. Yes. And Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
All in favor.
All right, did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes from the December 15th, 2020 meeting?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes dated December 15th, 2020.
I would second that.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Black.
Yes.
Trustee Dallison. Trustee Joswick.
Yes.
Trustee Moreland. Yes. Trustee Politis.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro. Yes. And Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
All in favor.
All right, moving on to department reports. Jeremy, do you have anything to add to your Public Works report?
I don't have anything to add, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys had.
Does the board have any questions for Jeremy? All right, moving on to our town marshal. It's Joe. Joe here.
Joe.
He was outside.
Okay. All right, Katie, do you have anything to add to your report?
I have nothing to add.
Does the board have any questions this time?
Yeah, I do have a quick question on the, where was it? And you and I shot some emails back and forth about the small business
Yeah, the
relief
Senate bill.
program.
Yes.
Yeah, and how does that affect us in terms of what our prioritizations are, or our distribution of funds, or that sort of thing, by virtue of the fact that La Plata County's in charge?
So we have to, first of all, find out that they have applied. The deadline is this week. Then on the 15th, the state will let us know what amount of money La Plata County would be eligible for. And they were eligible. We were in red as of December 10th. And we have the ability to participate with La Plata County. As long as La Plata County opts in, the town of Bayfield was not eligible
Right.
to apply for the funds individually. So as soon as we know the amount, I'm sure that La Plata County will reach out to us and we'll work on, next steps. And,
Okay.
we're anxiously waiting the next step.
Good, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Beth. Do you have anything you would like to add?
Beth actually does not have her report in the packet, and I'd really like her to present to packet because there's a lot that she's done here in this last month.
Perfect.
Great, thank you, Katie. The day the packets were due, I was busy doing check requests, so December's been very busy. We had the drive-through clinic with Basin Health. We did have to bail early because of the snow. We got all the initial grant rounds of backup paperwork finalized on the grants for $60,000 total. The new grant application we turned around literally knowing we had the funds in 24 hours, had that ready for our businesses. The thing I'm really proud about with Bayfield is we've continued to keep it a low barrier application area so that I could distribute written applications. With La Plata County and Durango, a lot of things had to be uploaded, but we really kept ours very Bayfield friendly. We have 27 applicants. We were given permission to include Viacito and Gem Village. Only one applicant was denied because they were long-term rental property and their renters were having a problem paying rent, so I was able to send them to another resource. 5 restaurants received $12,000, 2 received 10, 3 received 7,000. Other grants ranged from 1,700 to 5,000. The checks were cut on December 29th and distributed either in person or by mail. I stepped in to help a little bit with some of the early 5-star waiver program with Chavalos, as the understanding what an outdoor space is can be a little confusing. So I just took photos and shot them over to Pam Glasgow, who's running the 5-star program, also a good friend of mine. And then when the sheriff showed up to inspect, we came up with a really good compromise. A lot of the businesses and their owners and their staff are now applying for low-income energy assistance program. This will pay 1 year's heating bill and also line people up in the event that they want to opt in on that route with their Bayfield utilities. Ashley, thanks for the holiday lighting contest. We got that done. Shannon Lane with the Durango Herald. We talk every Monday. Lots of promotion with the Santa Claus parade, which I thought was just magnificent both nights. Joining in on task force meetings, Department of Human Services, Emergency Task Force, also weekly representation to Rotary, and the online fundraiser for Cooper Sossaman. Our goal was 5,000, and we're now just past 8,000.
Nice.
And we have a new goal now of 10,000, which point we will close it. And I am here to serve, excited about new money coming our way, and I've learned a lot in this process from the earliest days in September to where we are now.
All right, thank you, Beth. Does the board have any questions for Beth?
No question, but just you're doing a really good job, Beth. Thank you.
You are so welcome. This is the job of a lifetime. I'm just enjoying it. The town newsletter, the online dining guides, we made sure people knew who was open on New Year's Day. It's just better at Bayfield, and that's my job, to make sure that that's in front of everybody.
It's not going unnoticed.
For you, Beth, but I would like to ask if it's in the plan for us to continue the information for her. I would really like us to do so and look into that at some point, Katie.
Sure. I think that's a discussion that we've been having here the last couple months. So it will certainly be up to the board. We'll have some more discussions with Beth next week.
My official statement is, given the opportunity to continue on, I would do so.
All right, thank you, Beth. All right, moving on to our financial agenda items, the sales tax. Katie, do you want to?
Well, actually, you have our finance director is here. You did get an update of sales tax yesterday. Gosh, is it already Tuesday? So anyway, I just want to turn that over to Jennifer.
Okay, and I'm sorry, my computer was down several times. Katie, do you have thank you. My apologies, I didn't have my spreadsheets or anything with, but yes, we did. So I don't have the actual numbers in front of me as you guys received, but we're still up, obviously, and looking good with sales tax. And I still plan to tweak those spreadsheets a little bit, hopefully this next year, and make them a little bit more easier on the eyes and nice to look at. But if anybody had any questions, but it's pretty straightforward. So let me know if you have any questions. Also on financial note, Katie and I have discussed that we want to put it out there that December financials will not be available probably until the second meeting in February, so we're not we're not messing around. We have a final thing then, we have everything in that we need to discuss, and we're not going over something more than once. So let me know if you guys have any questions or any input prior to then, and
So on that note, I just want to make sure that you're aware that it looks like in previous years, when expenses were from 2019, instead of it being expensed into 2019, they were expensed into 2020. That's not the way I have ever done financial statements and allocations of funds. If it was an expense in the previous year, then we expense it to the previous year. So we want to make sure that we have a little extra time to go over those December financial statements, because we're concerned now that we may have 13 months of some expenses from 2020, but that should have been done in years past. So anyway, we'll try to make sure that we fully investigate and give you that full report in the end of February or middle of February.
Did you mean 2019?
No, I meant in 2019.
No, because, yeah, we're looking
when
at
they
2020 today, but in 13
No, when they went
months,
from
if you go back-
2019 to 2020, they took 2019 expenses and expenditured them into 2020. And that's not typically the way we're an accrual based, and that's
Right.
clear on our audit, that all the 2019 expenditures should have been expended
Fenced.
in 2019, but
Okay.
that was not done properly.
It's, yeah, and what Katie's saying, there's several, of our vendors that, there's several different issues where things were treated, where there was a little bit of a cash basis, versus accrual.
When we
And
get the
so-
audit next year, we'll be able to see that.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's very straightforward, and that's what Katie's saying. We'll be able to tell you exactly, but what we're doing is making sure that we get on the right basis again, and with membership, a big one is like memberships. You know, there was a lot of membership renewals that would be renewed, for instance, in 2019, but they were actually 2020 renewals.
So
And
it should have been expense for 2020.
That's correct.
Right.
Carried over, okay, that makes
Right.
sense.
So
You
there
know,
was a lot
or-
of flip-flops of
Right,
years.
okay.
Or, credit card expenses that the bill comes, the bill's dated January 1st, for instance, but the credit card charges were December charges. So
Right.
therefore, they should have been in the prior year, but they weren't
Okay.
treated that way last year. So
Well, it
this
does
year,
make sense to keep your books open for a month or
It's
6
for-
weeks
yes.
afterwards, so that you can make the
Well,
proper
right, and we're on
entries.
accrual basis,
Or-
so we have to make sure that we do that accurately, and there's been some not accurate ways of that in the past, but we're gonna get on the right arrow, and we'll make sure it's correct in the future, so that's what she's,
All right, thank you.
yeah.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Moving on to utilities, the wastewater master plan.
So I hope that you've all had wonderful reading of the wastewater master plan. This was actually presented to the staff last year, not quite a year ago. And so I'm hoping you've had a chance to read it. The engineer will do a final presentation at your next meeting on the 19th. Then you'll be asked to adopt it. There's some minor spelling changes, some minor things I think we're looking over, but I want to make sure that you had enough time to have a chance to read over that, because I think that you're talking about some, if you're looking at Heartwood and some other considerations, I think you need to get this basically finished before it's outdated. Let's put it that way.
Oh, absolutely.
I have a question for you. I have a question, and you probably just pass this on to the engineer, and then he will be able to answer it when he comes and makes a presentation. Somewhere in there, can't remember what page, but it said that there was the existing collection facilities are adequately sized for current and future surface needs. And I got to thinking about what the growth rate that he used was based on, and the reason that kind of came to mind was because of the housing study says the next 5 years is going to be a significant spike. Now, whose crystal ball is right?
Right.
But so I guess I was just curious as to what the growth rate was that he was using.
And I will ask that for sure. I do know on the rate study that was done was 2% growth rate. But this may have been a different growth rate. So we'll certainly make sure that we get that answered.
And then a final question on that, on the study is that, on page 84, there were, options were listed about what we could do, to help things out in terms of
That's correct.
infiltration and all that.
Yeah.
At some point in time, the board is going to have to take action on those methods.
Yes, and
Yeah.
we're actually going to work with the engineer on some ideas that have been hatched in the past that have been brought back up, and I think those are doable. But I think those are also things that we were looking, when we were actually talking about the budget, about infiltration and inflow that, is taxing your system, especially in the summertime when it's really not going through, it's not being flushed through the toilet, there's infiltration,
But-
so.
Yeah.
But it has been determined for the most part that the inflow and infiltration is primarily a downtown problem. It's not something that's coming from up there in the meadows or up there at Dove Ranch. It's primarily a downtown issue from the old pipe. Is that not correct?
In my experience, typically you have a study of where it's coming from. You don't guess. Granted, the older lines are probably in the downtown area, but that has never really.
So they do, so Jeremy does have it you have it at your disposal.
And Jeremy is
Jeremy,
certainly.
we could look at different videos of the little tractor going down the sewer line and tell whether or not we have a lot of water coming in particular
So
sewer taps, can't we?
in the experience that I've had, we videoed all of the collection lines to determine where those issues are. And mostly they're in areas of private lines, and some of the private lines, have been programs where you can go in and fix private lines. If they don't let you on the private property, then you can require that they fix it themselves. But that all takes a program that we need to kind of develop for your consideration, and we're not quite there yet.
Well, and-
we want to get a wastewater plan adopted first.
Going back to, because I think Josh and I are kind of looking at the same thing with that potential lease of private lanes and then lease back, or we lease it and then own it back, or somehow or another make it so that we're able to get the service lines back up to the house, up to snuff, so that they're not dumping excess water into our line.
Jeremy, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think what Trustee Black is trying to address is the camera study that was done in 2014, and some of that information was used to develop the master plan that we'll have the engineer present to you in the next meeting. I think that having that study be done in 2014, I think some of that information is a little bit dated at this time. So I think what Ms. Sickles is asking is that we can present the current wastewater master plan with some of the procedures and have those adopted moving forward. And that'll give us, as far as for staff, a good blueprint to move forward, with some of this I&I and start creating some of these projects to be able to address that. If that kind of makes sense to you guys.
All right, does the board have any other questions for staff? All right, so review that in your packet. All right, moving on to our action agenda items. Do we have any general public input related to action agenda items 5A or B out there on Zoom land? Seeing none, we will move on to 5A, Resolution 476, the emergency telephone charge.
So the letter that's actually in the packet with this is asking that it is done on an annual basis. And I thought it was interesting that Bayfield basically adopted this charge when it changed. The state statute also provides information about adopting this on an annual basis. It doesn't hurt. I don't see any harm in having a resolution on an annual basis adopting this. I always keeps that front and center that people do pay that charge. There is a reason for that charge. And there's times where you need to use emergency 911 and not call town hall. But actually, when you call town hall, there is a way to get, now that we fixed our phone system, to actually get to Public Works. So this is always good to just kind of keep this in front of you, and this is a charge that is paid, and it just shows your support for this continued emergency telephone fee.
All right, does the board have any other questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 476.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Black.
Yes.
Trustee Dallison.
Yes.
Trustee Joswick.
Yes.
Trustee Moreland.
Yes.
Trustee Politis.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro.
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
All in favor.
All right, moving on to Resolution 477, the Employee Handbook Amendment. Katie.
Yes, so actually in August, or actually in July, you just adopted a new employee handbook. There was some statement in there regarding additional holiday pay for employees if they were already at their 80 hours. We kind of went through some issues during one of the recent holidays in November, that we determined that FPPA really looks at a holiday pay completely differently. And so in order to be fair to the law enforcement and their retirement and the death and disability, it's only fair that we have to kind of exempt them from that one statement that's in the employee handbook. I always feel that it's very important, especially when you're managing personnel, that if there's a change in the handbook, it should be changed by resolution. All the employees should be aware of it, because informal changes in the handbook tend to create assumptions about changes in the handbook, and we should never, in my opinion, that should never happen. So it's a very minor change, but I think it's an important change to make sure that all employees understand that we're on, that, you know, there's different impacts to the law enforcement, that this is fair. And I'm not going to go into all the research because it took quite a few meetings.
Do I need to recuse myself?
At this point, from my understanding, that and the Attorney Goldman is on the phone, that your husband may at some point be one of those employees that would be exempt from that. So I would let your attorney speak to that point.
Yeah, I see no reason why there should be any sort of recusal at this time.
All right, does the board have any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve Resolution 477.
Madam Mayor, I would make a motion that we approve Resolution 477.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Black.
Yes.
Trustee Dallison.
Yes.
Trustee Joswick.
Aye.
Trustee Moreland.
Yes.
Trustee Politis.
Yes.
Trustee Cesaro.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. Mayor Tarkington.
Yes.
All in favor.
All right, moving on to the discussion portion of our meeting, the Municipal Code Section 11-3, marshal appointment and duties.
Yeah, so I actually copied the municipal code and provided the state statutes regarding the marshals I want to say employment at some point. During the performance evaluation for the marshal, I basically copied the same municipal code that the marshal serves at the pleasure of the Board of Trustees, which is certainly within your authority to continue that. And there was a conversation about possibly that the hire and fire would be within the town manager's authority. The appointment is always within the Board of Trustees' authority. That does not change. I would never have that authority. In the past, where I've actually had to fire a police chief, we had to go through that process of informing the board, I think it would have gotten a little bit ugly. What happened is that I terminated the police chief and provided the town attorney at the time provided the police chief with all the state statute, the legalities of that he had a right to go through. And then at the next meeting, the board determined that they would remove his appointment and give the chance for us to recruit another police chief. I have terminated other police officers as well, and that certainly was still within the marshals or my authority, but it's something for you to consider, something for you to have a discussion about. I'd also like your attorney to kind of explain some of the state statute that you're still would have to comply with should that occur, where the town manager would hire and fire, and the appointment would still be within the board's authority.
Hi, Michael.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so in essence, Title 31 is the municipal laws with regards to officers and how the boards of municipalities treat their officers. And officers can be people such as the town manager, the clerk, the Bayfield marshal is considered an officer. And generally, ultimately, if the town manager would take some sort of action, ultimately, the ultimate authority under statute is with the town board with regards to removal of officers. And generally, that removal can only occur upon a majority vote, a majority that agrees that the marshal or an officer should be removed. So ultimately, if the town manager were to act quickly to terminate, ultimately it would have to come before you for ratification of that decision, and ultimately the board would have to determine that termination was proper by a majority vote. And then, of course, the statute also states that the officer that is terminated would have to be told the reasons for that termination, what sort of charge gave rise to the termination. Okay, so it's either you guys can handle it proactively, or ultimately you would have to ratify that determination.
Joe,
That's some food for thought.
Joe, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or jump in on the discussion?
I'm sorry, me?
Did you? Yeah. Did you?
Sorry.
He's just wondering if it's okay if he gets
No,
fired.
I think it makes it consistent with all of the other positions in town. Additionally, it also takes some liability off of town board members as well. Michael could speak to that. But I think it just makes it consistent across the board for all department positions. Since we're making all these changes when it comes to policies and that type of thing. And I even brought it up. I don't know how the discussion started, but I brought it to Katie that I think that this is an appropriate step to take.
Yeah, I agree. I think Katie has a better pulse on staff, and that's that's her job, and
Well, that, that really is what the manager's hired for, is that they are the ultimate authority and they're doing the oversight for all of the employees. And if they see something that's egregious that needs to be addressed, and that means terminating somebody, then that's within their authority. And we as a board shouldn't second guess that too much. I think you would agree with that. I mean, that's why you hire competent managers.
Do we have any other comments from anyone?
I agree with what you guys. I really dislike masks.
Oh, they're a pain.
I agree with what you guys are saying. I just, and at some point in the discussion, it was said that we would be kept apprised of what was going on, and I think that's a very important step in this. So, given that, yes, I agree with what you're saying on it.
It seems like,
As well. I agree, especially with what Josh, trustee Jaws.
and it seems like this might be from a bygone era. That,
It's from way back in the
78.
Something.
right.
Yeah,
It just seems like it's a little outdated, so yeah.
So it was very typical in the 70s and 80s that the board, the town manager, the town clerk, the public works director, everybody served at the pleasure of the board. Personnel issues could become very, very difficult, and with being at a lot of those SURSA meetings and having those presentations, boards get tangled up in a personnel issue and really can find themselves personally liable. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen here, but yes, it is one of the older. You can still fire me too, anytime. So.
Yeah, and just to give some historical perspective here, I've seen several occasions with Bayfield marshals that got real ugly. And, if we can get around that, I think that's a really good step to take.
Sure. So I'm kind of hearing, a thumbs up or kind of to go that direction. What I'll do is work on an ordinance with, including Marshall McIntyre, Attorney Goldman, and we'll kind of review that. It may not come up on the 19th, but it'll be there in February at some point, just to make sure that everybody has a chance to review it.
Yeah, good.
Great. Okay, do we have any board reports?
Ooh, you're lucky I'm not going to talk tonight.
I had Alliance this morning, and we talked a lot about the 5-star program, and if anyone has any questions about that, you can feel free to hit me up. It's very confusing at this point, but
I just from what I've read, that does look to be like a real big headache.
a little bit. It'll work itself out, I believe. But and then I just wanted to throw it out there. I kind of want to get the temperature of the board about going to a 6:30 start time. Does that excite anybody? Or are we good at 7? Can people make it at 6:30?
That excites me.
It's fine.
Brenna?
Yeah.
I'm okay with it, but it might pose a problem for my employment if they're doing the other things that we do ahead of time. If it was
Like our work sessions?
work sessions, yeah. That's where it could pose a problem for me, but
But I think if we do have a work session, maybe we could just start our work session at 6:30.
And then just move
And
the
just
start
kinda
time
move-
back an hour.
Yeah.
That'd be fine too.
if we do that, then it's not gonna be a problem, and I'd actually like it, because then we'd be done early.
Right.
Yes, I just want to confirm if we start earlier, we end earlier.
This is true. So
You have never been a planning commissioner.
Yeah.
Or does it mean that we get done 3 minutes earlier?
Yeah.
that's the goal. So I just wanted to throw it out there, kind of get a feeling for what what works for everybody. And if a 6:30 start time works, I feel like we could make that happen.
I think we started at 6 too.
6:30. People have to get home from Durango.
So we will, kind of, given the temperature here, we'll try January and February at 6:30. If there's a work session, that work session will start at 6:30, and we'll just go right into our regular meeting. I'll make sure the times look like we could be earlier than 7:30. And and if at the middle of February you don't like it or want to do something different, we'll change it. So I do like to see for public input that meetings are consistent times, so they don't think you're hiding something earlier or later. But anyway.
All right. Does anybody have anything else to add today?
Excellent work on snow removal. Very, very good. Thank you all for the hard work that you guys put in. And that is from my entire neighborhood who asked me to put that out there.
Anyone else? All right. I'm going to adjourn this meeting. It is 8:04.
Bingo.
All right, I think I got this figured out. I did get in, so.
I know that David serves